Excuse me, garbage. I'll take your spot. I gotta stand for this part because it's spicy. It gets me worked up. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hello, my name is Drew. My pronouns are they, them, and this is my channel where I make videos all about my mental health and improving it and hopes that it inspires you all to improve your mental health as well. In today's video, I wanted to talk about what it was like to get diagnosed with ADHD at 25 years old and just my experience living with ADHD as an adult, as well as when I was a child. This is the first video of a series I'm calling Just Surviving My Own Mind. In this series, I'll be talking about the mental health disorders that I deal with in hopes that it helps someone else out there who is also struggling with what's going on in their own mind, and maybe help them to feel a little less alone. I do just want to add a quick disclaimer that I am not a mental health professional, nor do I claim to be an expert on any of the things that I discuss on my channel. I'm simply just a person talking about my own experiences, with the hopes that it may help someone else out there who is also struggling and help them to feel a little less alone. Lastly, I will do my best to be as thorough as I can about putting trigger warnings as they're warranted throughout the series, and I do apologize in advance if I forget or miss one, but do keep in mind that this is a video, a part of a series, talking entirely about mental health issues. If you are easily triggered by conversations about mental health, it might be best to just skip this series entirely or until you feel ready to watch. So in October of 2021, at 25 years old, I was diagnosed with a combined type of ADHD. Combined simply means that I experience both hyperactive and impulsive as well as inattentive symptoms. To be honest, up until my diagnosis, I assumed that I was predominantly inattentive ADHD, but that was only because I was uneducated on the hyperactive and impulsivity symptoms, and so I basically just assumed that the hyperactive and impulsive symptoms I was experiencing were actually just me being inattentive. So for all of the ADHD symptoms that are listed on the cdc.gov website, which is the resource that I will be linking in the description box below for anyone else who may be interested in learning about ADHD symptoms as well as the types of ADHD. But looking at the symptoms that they have listed, I resonate with all of the inattentive symptoms as well as about 95% of the hyperactive/impulsivity symptoms. So long before actually getting my diagnosis, I knew I had ADHD. In fact, I knew I had ADHD before I even knew that there was a word for it. But it was still largely a boys thing, so most girls and people perceived as girls were left undiagnosed and unsupported, and unfortunately I was one of those people. And because of this, I, like many others who have also received a late diagnosis, feel like I've lost years. Years where I could have received the support I needed, where I could have gained confidence in myself, and maybe even gotten better grades, or at least just not internalized the idea that I'm a bad or troubled student simply because of my very evident ADHD symptoms. Now, as an adult, looking back on those years, I can't help but feel angry for my younger self, because school was so hard for me. All of my school years were brutal because not only did I struggle academically, but I also had bad experiences with teachers and was bullied relentlessly by my fellow students. Honestly, and I'm sure I'm not the only student who dealt with this, but I was constantly given just passing grades in elementary school so I would become the next teacher's problem. Or that's how I took it anyways. Then I hit high school and was completely unprepared and unsupported for the workload. I'm so serious when I say that I'm lucky I even graduated high school, especially since statistically over 32% of ADHDers drop out of high school in comparison to the 15% of students who drop out but don't have a psychiatric disorder. And since that study is from 2011, I'm willing to bet that that 32% is actually a lot higher considering how many people are still undiagnosed even into adulthood. Even for the ADHDers who don't drop out, we're still more likely to fall behind in class in comparison to our non-ADHD peers. In fact, I fell so far behind throughout my 4 years of high school, I ended up failing 5.5 classes, one of which my teacher did end up passing me on because she let me hand in something late. So technically 4.5 classes, but still, my academic difficulties didn't go away. They got worse, even with the IEPs that had been developed for me, which I'm pretty sure I got started with at a young age. So getting into high school and discovering that my academic problems didn't miraculously disappear, I was set up with a new IEP, or my old one carried over. I'm not really sure how that worked. With that IEP, I was sent to the resource room by myself with no help. If I did have a question, I had to walk all the way back to my classroom, which could have been on another floor or at the opposite end of the hallway, just to ask my teacher. Although I do know that sometimes I was sent to the resource room because I was distracting others, which is totally understandable and valid. But seeing as my IEP was supposed to help me catch up as well as learn the material better, it seemed pretty ineffective and inefficient to make me take extra steps just to receive the same amount of support as everyone else, or arguably less. Then beyond my academic struggles, I also faced being bullied by my peers as well as some teachers. I have a memory that has literally stuck with me since 10th grade, I think, when my math teacher asked me to stay behind after class. I think he started by asking if I always had trouble focusing, to which I answered yes because I do. And then he said, "Are you on medication?" And I said no. And he said, "Well, you should be." And I just remember being so offended by that, which then triggered a stigma about ADHD medication for me. Although he was absolutely correct, I do very much benefit from ADHD medication, that wasn't the point. The part about that makes me so upset is that he never did anything to help me get access to those medication. There were a number of people he could have reached out to, who could have reached out to my parents, or he could have just sent a letter home recommending that I get a behavioral assessment done. Doing that may not have changed anything for me, but it could have. It could have helped me a lot. And the resentment that I feel for that lost opportunity, which honestly feels stolen to me, is valid. Just like any other negative emotion I and other folks with late diagnoses feel about our experiences. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand that teachers have a lot going on and that ADHD diagnoses weren't as common, especially for girls, and that a lot of people don't even believe in ADHD, including some teachers, and that there's only so much support a student can get without some kind of a diagnosis. I also understand that there were so many variables that interfered with my ability to get a diagnosis throughout all of my school years, and that a lot of those variables were or may have been out of my teachers, parents, and doctors' hands. But, and this is for all of the folks out there with a late diagnosis, our anger, our frustration, our resentment is valid. Our thoughts, our feelings, our experiences are all valid. So don't let anyone convince you otherwise, not even yourself. The next thing that I wanted to talk about, although I won't go too much into, is my frustration around the lack of research, lack of concrete answers, and that the limited research that we do have is rooted in male gender bias. Like I said at the beginning of this video, ADHD, and at the time ADD, was thought to be a boys' thing, basically because of gender stereotypes and sexism. So I understand why the research is centered around men's and AMAB-focused ADHD, but there's still no excuse for how outdated and how biased the current research is, considering how aware we are of gender stereotypes and sexism. And this goes for all medical research. This is also especially harmful because it means that girls, women, and AFAB folks are still going undiagnosed, which can lead to an increased risk of early death as well as detrimental psychological effects such as anxiety disorders, depression, and low self-efficacy, which can lead to the development of a perfectionist personality trait, and that is linked to and can play a major role in the development of a psychological pattern commonly known as imposter syndrome. And then in terms of the early death risk, every unmedicated ADHDer, whether diagnosed or not, faces a greater risk of premature death by preventable accidents such as car crashes or drug overdoses. But women and people who grew up being perceived as a girl face an even greater risk because of the likelihood of a misdiagnosis during childhood. I definitely do plan on diving way further into this because I have so much more to talk about and so much more to say, but I did just briefly want to touch on this in this video because I think it's incredibly important to educate yourself as well as talk about. I say this as someone who is and knows of others who also have received a late diagnosis, which has been the direct result of the gender bias within research. Even research that goes beyond ADHD, endometriosis, PMDD, PCOS, just to name a few. I don't have COVID, by the way, don't worry. I also plan on making a video about the male gender bias within medical research and education. So be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on that or any of my other future videos. The final thing I want to talk about in today's video is what it's like to finally be diagnosed. And honestly, it's changed my life. I started medication not long after my diagnosis, and getting on those meds helped me to realize just how hard life was for me. It's like you're playing a video game without realizing you're playing hard mode, and then once you finally play easy, you're like, oh, I can actually do this. I truly didn't see how hard life was for me until I got on medication, and they made my life so much easier. I'm also kind of relearning myself, my brain, and what works for me, which has been kind of fun, to be honest. I'm slowly figuring out and designing systems and routines that work with my ADHD instead of against it. I'm excited to see how my next few months to a year go now that I'm diagnosed. Also, if you have any ADHD-friendly tips or recommendations, or if you have any ideas for ADHD content that you'd like me to make, please leave them in the comments below. I would absolutely appreciate that. This is definitely only the beginning of all the ADHD content I'm going to be making on my channel, since getting my ADHD diagnosis only a few months ago was really just the start of a new chapter in my life. So if you are interested in ADHD content, which I'm assuming you are if you've clicked on this video and you've watched it to this point, which I thank you so much for, it really helps me out. Please also be sure while you're here to hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss out on any of my future uploads, as I upload every other week on Tuesday. I just want to thank you all again for watching this video, and if you did enjoy, please be sure to hit that like button because it really does support my channel. And please don't forget to follow me on all of my social media. They're always the pinned comment in the comments, and then that way you can keep up with me in between my bi-weekly videos. Please don't forget to be gentle with yourself, and I will see you all next time. Bye! English. Even when it's your first language, it's a hard language. It's with, no, fuck me sideways. I said that right too. Me nostrils be leaking. Why is it always that my nose runs as soon as I start filming? You gotta go lie down, honey. I really don't need your showing up in my mic. Mr. Toothless. Fucking 6 minutes of footage and I haven't even finished my intro. If you hear breathing, it's because it's my dog. I don't know why this is such a hard sentence to fucking say. In this series, I need water. And hope. Ah, fuck off, man. Advance if I forget or fuck off. Oh, it's my cousin. Whoopsies. This is the most ironic thing that I can't get through this sentence because my ADHD. Or arguably. Hey Google, how do you say arguably?
That's pronounced arguably.
Arguably. Okay, I'm saying that right. Although he was right. Our frustration, our diagnosis. No, that's not right. Wow, I'm not stoned. I didn't smoke at all before this. Okay. Nope, reflection. It always gets me. Excuse me, garbage. I'll take your spot. I gotta stand for this part because it's spicy. It gets me worked up. Now, smooch. Quit licking. Since this is just don't forget to be gentle with yourself, and I will see you all next time.